Devilman Crybaby is a pretty terrible title for a fairly solid anime that seemingly came out of left field. The show overall is solid. Honestly, the narrative's a bit contrived and some of the situations are forced, but these are not the reasons for the absolutely extreme amount of success and praise that the show has received. Today, I want to talk about the biggest contributing factor to Devilman Crybaby's success, and that is in its style. Stylization is hard, especially in a medium such as anime, where the rules of how you build your characters and worlds are generally locked in by the tropes of the medium. Nevertheless, this doesn't stop shows from branching out and taking a swing at it. Some shows are extremely successful, one of my favorites being Fruit of Grisea with its beautiful visual style replicating that of a cinematic experience. Another being Madoka Magica with its looser visual style that takes some time to get used to, but really helps immerse you into the narrative. And that is what I think is the most important part about developing a style for your show. Merely changing the aesthetic look of a show so it stands out among the rest isn't particularly impressive. It's when that different look and feel enhances your experience with the narrative. Speaking of which, I should probably clarify the difference between style and aesthetic. The aesthetic of a show generally just refers to the visual art of the show. How a shot is framed, what's in the frame, what's not in the frame, and the colors are all examples of how to build a desired aesthetic or look. Style, on the other hand, is a much more broad definition. It covers the aesthetic of the show along with the editing and pacing, how certain shots are put side by side, how things are intercut, how fast shots cut back and forth, and of course, the sound design. All fall under the umbrella term that is style. And Devilman Crybaby definitely has a distinctive style. By the way, I do want to preface this part of the video by saying that there will be a small amount of nudity. I know I might get age-gated, but today we're talking about art, and more specifically the style of said art. And in Devilman Crybaby, nudity plays a large role, so we won't be censoring the art just because it's not advertiser-friendly. First, I'd like to talk about the aesthetic design of the show. The color palette chosen in the more pure scenes is dull, mostly focusing on the color white. The look of the overall show is meant to feel simplistic, really forcing you to focus in on the details of what is actually in the frame. The show does this a lot. They build a frame and then take just about everything out of it, leaving only the important details in. One of my favorite examples of this is in episode 2. The family is sitting down for supper and the camera pans across them as they all eat. But the frame never stops panning left, leaving the entire family only to focus on the painting on the wall, which is the Last Supper. This is some incredible foreshadowing of what is to come. I think the aesthetic choice to go with this was brave but highly rewarding. At first, it feels a bit blunt, saying, hey, this anime is going to focus on religious lore. But the more you break it down, the more you realize that this painting has multiple meanings. For instance, is this their Last Supper together? Is there a Jesus-like figure among them? And just maybe, one of them will betray the family soon. Another aesthetic design I wish to talk about is the darker scenes of the anime. Basically at any point in the early parts of the show where Akira turns into Devilman. The colors switch from these primarily white, low contrast colors to high contrast and bright colors, complementing the major tonal shift that is occurring. The art also changes from relatively normal and proportional characters to exaggerated movements and body shapes. This really sells these sequences. But the main way they differentiate these two types of scenes is the primary use of white and black. In most of the normal scenes, as I said earlier, white is the primary color used, but in these darker scenes, black is the base color used. Once again, separating these two worlds that Akira lives in. There's also an interesting duality to these colors, but that's impossible to talk about without spoiling the show, so I'm gonna keep that to myself. While we're on topic of the darker scenes, it's hard to talk about the show without talking about its incredible editing. A lot of sequences are put together to showcase a different feeling. I think one of the best examples has to be the Rave Scene from episode 1. The scene starts at a relatively normal pace, but as the scene escalates, so does the pacing. The shots get faster and faster, and some of the transitions from shot to shot are just gorgeous. You really feel the horror that Akira is experiencing, and it's portrayed through this amazing editing. The pacing really brings us into this moment and shows us this feeling of pure dread, even going back on itself and slowing down as Akira's death is shown to be almost inevitable. And the final piece I have to talk about is the music. As for the soundtrack, it's extremely strong. The theme itself is distinctive enough to stand out along with a few of the other pieces included, but the soundtrack never feels dominant. It knows its place. There are many scenes where they intentionally don't include music. One of my favorites is during most of the rapping scenes. For the rapping scenes themselves, I'd recommend watching them subbed. They translated a few of the raps in the dub version of the show, but I just feel like the sub versions are better in every way. I think episode 4's rap is incredible. It's a sign of hope for humanity as he explains that he just wants to be accepted for who he is, but also harsh foreshadowing of what will happen to Miki. And this is a common theme throughout the show. They will occasionally start an episode with one of the characters rapping about the situation they are in, and then show the results usually later in the episode. The style of Devilman Crybaby is incredible. It's unique, but most importantly, it majorly influences how we experience the narrative. And that's something that most anime are incapable of. I think most shows are afraid to try this, and rightfully so. An anime with a bad style can instantly turn viewers away from the show without even giving the narrative itself a second chance. But Devilman Crybaby did it anyway, and perhaps became one of the most popular shows of the year. We hit 20,000 subscribers! Thank you guys so much, and thank you for all of your support. That's obviously a huge goal I've had my eyes on for quite some time now. Also, I'm going to be at Anime LA this upcoming weekend, so if you happen to see me there, please come up and say hi. I'd love to meet some of you guys. The best way to probably get my attention would be through Twitter, but if you happen to see me and you're not 100% sure if it's me, because I know I'm pretty generic looking, the best way to tell is my pink heart t-shirt. That was bad. There we go, my pink heart t-shirt. I'll be wearing it all weekend long. Either way, thank you guys so much for 20,000 subscribers. A huge shout out to all of my patrons. If it wasn't for you guys, my channel would not be alive right now. If you're interested in how I edit, chatting with me, or just supporting the channel, I run a $1 a month Patreon to make it as easy as possible. Make sure you guys share, like, comment, and subscribe. This is Manime Matt. Make sure you guys say, man, go watch that goddamn anime!